I almost forget I don't need to have one of those towering pulpits like they have in old Unitarian churches where the minister goes up a stepladder. I don't need that. I'm tall enough. I love that hymn, When a Heart is in a Holy Place. And I'm honored to know the creator, Joyce Poley. For many years, Joyce and her husband, John, were part of a group of folks from British Columbia who would travel across the border each year to participate in a Unitarian Universalist camp at Seebeck, Washington. I have for many years attended that same camp. I served on the Elliott Board of Directors, the board of the Elliott Institute, which is the organization, the UU organization that sponsors the camps at Seebeck, which I'm Poley. I've been to Winter Elliott's that both Joyce and John attended. And I swear every time I sing that hymn, I hear Joyce's voice echoing in my ear as though she were leading the singing. Now, I'm a member of a group of folks who regularly attend that camp there at Seebeck who believe the song was written about Elliott Institute at Seebeck. Perhaps it was the gatherings that come together there that inspired her language at a place where we see each other in each other's lives, where we tell our stories from deep within and we listen with a loving mind. Maybe she was thinking about Elliott small group discussions and other deep conversations that often take place at Seebeck. Elliott Institute is as noted as the sponsoring UU entity of the camps that are held 4 times a year at Seebeck, Washington's Conference Center near Bremerton. I'm going to do a little bit of an infomercial. I recommend it highly as a place to gather with fellow seekers. You can check them out at elliotinstitute.org. But back to the topic, whether or not those gatherings are the inspiration for the song, Seebeck is indeed a very special place and a very holy place. It's located on the edge of a forest with multiple housing and meeting buildings scattered along a sloping, mostly grassy meadow. Sprinkled amongst it are some truly amazing trees for when you need some shade. Porches and courtyards and multiple benches look out over the waters of the Hood Canal, which, by the way, is not actually a canal, but rather a narrow finger of the massive glacially carved Puget Sound, which reaches out and fills the low spaces between the mountains, Olympic Peninsula, and the bulk of Washington State with water. Now, I want you to just envision, if you will, if you look at a map of Washington, it's kind of shaped like a hand with closed fingers. It would actually stretch down a little bit to my wrist. Well, the Olympic Peninsula is the thumb. And the fjord that is the Hood Canal is probably a wrinkle down here someplace. It's in the lower reaches of the Sound. Early Western explorers designated the canal, which is actually, as I noted, a fjord, as a channel. But the latter name, canal, appeared on some early charts, and that name stuck. It was confusing to me for a long time why they called it that. Looking west across the fjord from Seebeck, one sees the steep hills that climb all the way to the snow-covered peaks of the Olympics to the west. In my numerous visits to the place, the sun sneaking down between those peaks has gifted me with some of the most amazing sunsets I've ever witnessed. Mountains, reflective waters, and a forested frame offer a beautiful display. It is stunning. I first visited there at Seebeck in 1968 as an attendee at a UU youth group gathering for a group called LRY, Liberal Religious Youth it was called. I can share more about LRY another day, but I want to note today that I still, 50 plus years later, remember sitting on the porch at the inn at Seebeck, watching the sun go down with Rick Maston, the songwriter and troubadour who gifted us with the song, Let It Be a Dance. You see, Rick was the theme speaker for that youth con back in 1968. I have to fill in a little piece. The youth con, they call the conferences con, and if you want to have the youth know what you're talking about, you talk about cons, not conferences. Well, I returned to CBEC, not again until 1994, when I was invited to be the preschool teacher for the summer camp. Well, I met a woman there the very first night who told me she had been to that same camp back in 1968. She told me she'd been going to youth camps at CBEC off and on since she was 11 years old. Well, I fell in love with that place and with that woman, whose name is Suzanne, and we will soon be celebrating our 25th year of marriage. I joined her at CBEC regularly, as a CBEC regular, attending almost every summer and many years over New Year's Eve. I will be there next week for a smaller UU camp called Elliott Arts. And of all things, most of the summer conferences, there's a theme speaker you go to listen to in the morning, and the children are off doing what they're doing. Well, at Arts Elliott, there aren't children this year. We all had to certify that we're vaccinated as part of our admissions process and procedures. And you do an art workshop. My wife is doing one on making prayer flags, and I'm going to do West African drumming, which is terrifying to me. I mean, I noticed Sharon doing a foot tap behind the pulpit here that you didn't see. Well, Dennis is challenged sometimes with rhythm, but hopefully, after working with a West African drumming teacher, I'll be a little better in the future. But it's awesome, and I'm going there mostly to be in the place and with the gathered community. You know, because the Elliott experiences, CBEC is about much more than the locale. The holiness of the place is strongly fed by the people who come there with deep intentions and in even deeper love. People have been coming to the conference center as informal spiritual community for over 100 years, and I feel something special that emanates in that place. There are, for me, and I know for many others, in that place, the God of our heart stirs within. Yes, those camps offer to all of us attending a special holy place. And whether or not it's about CBEC, I love that song and its loving message. Not everyone does, however. I recently came across a blog by Reverend Kimberly DuBois, a UU clergy colleague whom I've not yet had the opportunity to meet. In describing herself, Reverend Kimberly says, "I am many things at many times. Professionally a writer, editor, singer, actor, director, designer, muse, and minister. Having served in congregations, I'm now a community minister working with congregations in the area of arts and worship. Personally, a queer, cisgendered woman who loves art, theater, film, books, television, music. Spiritually, a seeker, a journeyer, a radical universalist with process tendencies, and in the true wrestles with the God meaning, a daughter of Israel. My home is Unitarian Universalism. Mentally, a deep thinker, a minister, a chanteuse." In her blog post, she reflects on a number of hymns from our gray hymnal. And the teal one as well, reflecting on Joyce Poley's "When Our Heart is in a Holy Place." She says, "I want to like this one." Composer Joyce Poley is one of the sweetest human beings I've ever met. She was open, generous, and kind to us UU Musicians Network Conference newcomers. She had amazing insights when it comes to song leading. And there is a sweetness to the music she writes. And there is an earnestness to the lyrics. They want to be good and inclusive and expansive. They want to paint a picture of beloved community. There are some great lines, too. We see each other. We see our faces in each other's eyes. And trust the wisdom of each of us are fantastic nuggets of insight. But the truth is, she says, I don't like this song. And not just because of the grammatical oddity of our heart. I don't like it because it's bad theology. She continues, at least it's bad universalist theology because it's creating conditions where none should apply. She's reminded of this quote from Hosea Ballou. Your child has fallen into the mire, and its body and its garments are defiled. You cleanse it and array it in clean robes. The query is, do you love your child because you have washed it, or do you wash it because you loved it? This song, Rev Kimberly continues, this sweet song written by this sweet person suggests that we are only loved, only holy, when we have been behaving in open and expansive ways. We are blessed with love and amazing grace when our heart is in a holy place, reads the lyric. No, just no. We are blessed with love and amazing grace because our hearts are always and already holy places. Sure, we should do those other things, but the conditional nature of this song is just wrong. Well, Reverend Kimberly, I heard what you said and I disagree. And though it's not about a question of differing theology, I too sometimes describe myself as sort of a radical universalist. In fact, I'm one of the people in our movement, Unitarian Universalism, who considers Unitarian an adjective to describe what kind of universalist I am. I embrace the universalist, no questions asked kind of love that Ballou describes when he speaks of parental love. The kind of love, by the way, that Hosea Ballou believed we all receive from the Holy Father in heaven. That kind of love, whether parental or theological, is unconditional. It's noted in the quote from Reverend Ballou, which many have called the father of American Universalism. Reverend Kimberly lifted up, we offer care to others because we love them no matter what. I do not see the holy place that Joyce Poley described in her beautiful lyrics as conditional. I see it as aspirational. My mentor minister, the Reverend Carolyn Colbert, who served in Eugene for 9 years when I was just coming into the notion of becoming a minister, used to open many a Sunday worship with a simple call to worship. She would say, we are loving and caring people, but sometimes we forget. We come together in church to remember. Carolyn, whose mother and father were both, prior to the merger of the Unitarians and the Universalists, ordained Universalist clergy. Her father, in fact, for many years was the head of the religious education department in the Universalist Church of America. Carolyn was immersed throughout her life in a lived theology of love. At my ordination as a UU minister, Carolyn offered to me a bit of loving wisdom that I always will remember. She advised me as I entered ministry to remember that I am held by a love that's existed since before the beginning, will never let me go, and never will. Each and every one of us is held by a love that has existed since before the beginning. A love that has never let you go and never will. Belief in that love is central to my own radical universalist faith. Yet sometimes I forget. Carolyn, like her and our universalist fare-bearers, had a deep faith in our universal goodness and our inherent worthiness and in the power of love, a love for all, not just for those who have done the right thing or followed the proper path or simply stayed clean. We are loving and caring people yet. And that's the key word, that short word, yet. Yet sometimes we forget. We miss the mark. We get impatient and we judge ourselves and others. I know I certainly do that. So we come together in church or in other forms or places of spiritual practice to remember and to practice. To practice being the loving people we are all called to be. There are times and places and communities in which we gather where it's easier to practice unconditional loving. There are holy places where blessings flow more freely. Some of these holy places are planned to be that way, like the Elliott Institute gatherings at Seebeck, or a Sunday service here. This place, this building, these grounds, this gathered community is made holy by our shared presence. Here, our heart is in a holy place. Sometimes we might find our own holy places in nature. These natural holy places may be the places that take our breath away and remind us that we are part of something awesome and awe-inspiring, like the sunsets at Seebeck. Sometimes we see something super and natural. Your holy place in nature might be a quiet grove of trees someplace, or perhaps a corner of your own garden where you find the silence of sacred space. I'm sure many of you have such places, be they in a nearby park or someplace you visited once, but exists forever in your mind's eye. Several parks in and around Eugene are special to me. I have also been blessed to visit amazing places across the U.S. and across the world. I've also been working diligently to increase the sacred beauty of my own backyard. Sometimes the circle of one's family can be a place to practice the admittedly sometimes challenging place. It's a good place, though, to practice unconditional love. The Baloo quote shared earlier reminds us of what such love looks like. When our kids are being sweet and cute, loving them is easy. When they are being defiant or uncooperative, we might briefly forget. But in the good times and the hard times too, we remember and we practice loving them unconditionally. In parenting, in community, and in our interrelationship with that which we call holy, we deepen our commitment to unconditional love through practice. As in the case of any forms of spiritual practice, we intentionally create times and places, settings, rituals, and communities where we invite the practice of loving compassion to flow more freely. Often the seeking practice is easier in groups. Buddhists call communities of practice Sangha, and coming together in Sangha in practice is key to deep immersion in that spiritual path. In my own Buddhist practice, I regularly recite a metta prayer which says, in part, "When with a boundless mind should one cherish all living beings, radiating friendliness all over the entire world, so let one cultivate a boundless goodwill for the entire world, uncramped, free from ill will or enmity." At the best of times, I recite that prayer with others in my Sangha, a community of practice. Do I do what the prayer calls me to do and be fully loving every day? Well, no, not exactly. But I aspire to do so. And through practice, I can and do get just a little bit closer to living the way I truly want to live and being the way I truly aspire to be. In communities that come out of the Christian tradition, we call the community of practice church, or fellowship, or perhaps congregation. And we come together to practice the multifaceted work of loving fully and loving deeply in such places. In times like this morning, we do so with ritual intention. Here, we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, creed, and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes. In our sharing of joys and sorrows, we tell our story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words. Through the singing of familiar songs and the recitation of familiar affirmations, in shared meditations and simply breathing together, lighting our sacred chalice, we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within. And we feel the power of each other's faith. Here, our hearts are in a holy place, a place of loving and a place of practice. May it always be so.